Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me have your attention, please. All quiet, please. Thank you. So go ahead, open up to your notes as we continue looking at the Russia situation in history. Last we left off, we were looking at poor Alexander II. Gosh, it didn't work out very well for him because he got blowed up. Okay? Yes, indeed. Oh my gosh. This is so confusing. Is Morgan here? She's not. Morgan. Morgan sits there. No, I've got to mark some tardies though now because people need to take care of. So I now see Vera. Yeah, I know. Well, it needs to be. It's an Ava. Close the door. No. No. Okay. Yeah, folks need to be here. So check. I'm going ahead and marking down tardies unless somebody gives bring me Trey. Unless somebody brings a note from the teacher, and if they are keeping you late, then I need them to give you a note, excusing tardies and so forth. That way it's kind of maybe impresses upon teachers not to keep you late, because there should be enough time. I know with my classes, especially if somebody needs to use the bathroom after class, then it's I'm not going to hold you up. I mean, there's no real harm as far as social distancing, and the next class shouldn't have to wait 3 minutes to get started just because of previous classes and so forth. So just talk to your teachers, make sure that they're letting you out on time, especially if you need to use the restroom, okay? At the same time? Yeah, that's not good. All right, so, ready? You'll want to bring in one of these 2 weeks from today with your predictions if you want to get some extra credit on those presidential predictions. I've got 2 that were turned in yesterday. They're both predicting a very narrow Biden win, and they took some time. I would say you guys benefit from having the very, very latest polls, but I think they've identified the very obvious states, right? I mean, both of them have got California as going to Biden and Idaho going to Trump. I mean, those are obvious ones, yeah.
So does it do on the third for us? Can we do it in another class on the third and then turn it into?
I would say if that were my class and you were doing something not associated with my content area, I would not be happy about that, because I really come unglued when people are doing other homework and other class stuff during my time. But you'll have to take that up with your teacher. Okay? Yeah. So, but it's not that hard. I mean, it doesn't take very long. Some of those websites are really, 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 really helpful as far as telling you kind of what is going on. I mean, there's one that I was looking at today. It's got this snake, and it's the dark blue. They've got a spot for each of the states that are really highly likely going to be for Biden, and the dark red ones for Trump, and then the ones kind of in between. Those are the ones that are lighter shaded, and those are a little trickier to call, but hey.
When we first started this, you showed us at 27.
270 to win.
And it said that Biden was going to win, so I put everything perfectly, and it's already bumped.
For that same website?
Yeah.
Really?
Like I put the exact.
Well, I mean, the math is kind of tricky and so forth. If you do it on the map itself, it'll come up with the numbers, and that way if you do that correctly, then you can just transfer those numbers ultimately to your thing. So, yeah. You still got 2 weeks, okay? 2 weeks' time. Next. All right, now this is very important. you guys know what you're doing next Thursday at North Star? PSATs, right. So where do you come? To North Star, right? It's a green day, but you guys are blue, and you will be here. As one of my seniors pointed out, because they have their SAT on Tuesday, you guys don't come to school on Tuesday, but you weren't anyway. You're going to come to school next week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right? And so, also on Thursday, the PSAT. The test itself takes place between like 8 and 11:30. Have you had information? Has someone come and spoken to you? You read the email. What did the email say?
People, optional for 9th graders.
Yeah. 10th graders have got it paid for by the state.
Yeah.
So there's some 9th graders that sign up. Some of you guys might have taken it last year. You would pay for it, and basically, so this is your second time around. And even some 11th graders can take the PSAT too.
And then I think between Thursday and Thursday's an off day for us.
Yep.
You don't have the right to get back to school at home. You will leave in study hall.
Yeah.
If you don't,
Raise your hand if you're like, I kind of remember hearing something like that or reading something about that. All right, this is why I wanted to bring it up to you guys, because I've got a really strong opinion for you and some strong advice for you. The test itself will start at about 8 o'clock, and you'll be in whatever room you're assigned, and there'll be a proctor. You know, who knows if you're going to be in here. I won't be here in the very early hours of that day, because I'm not proctoring, somebody else is proctoring in this classroom. You'll wrap up at about 11:30 or so, okay? And at that point, you're right. You can go home, but it has to be arranged. So if you're taking the bus, you would have to wait until 2:45, unless you've got that arranged. That's why you don't want to necessarily throw away the email. Because what I'm going to recommend you do is, how many of you guys are like, I would actually like to leave North Star after the PSAT is done? I think so. Because otherwise, you're sticking around here for lunch, and then Mr. Pettit told me that this is exactly kind of how it's going to be going in those 3 periods afterwards. You'll go to those classes. And basically what will happen on that Thursday in here, I'll be doing exactly the same thing that you will have experienced on Wednesday of next week. And on Wednesday, as well as on Monday, I'll be going through, I think we're going to be doing like Animal Farm. I'm going to show you the film, because that'll fit perfectly on those 2 days. It's actually going to work out fine. And then the green team, on Tuesday, they'll watch the first half at home, you know, as is convenient to them, because it's on YouTube. And then they'll watch the second half at home, or if they're still here. I really am hopeful that a lot of you, I mean, I love seeing you guys, that's for truth. But if I added up all of my 7th period students, I've got 12 in here under normal circumstances. We're missing a couple today. And then I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 in my green group. And they'll all be here, at least for the test. I don't know how many of them are going to go home. I can only have 15 people in the room, so some of you guys would have to go to another spot. So make arrangements. Here's the takeaway. Make arrangements to have somebody pick you up so that you can go home after the PSAT, okay? Otherwise, you get to hang with me during 6th period. Woohoo! And then your 7th period teacher will be like, yay! And same thing with your 8th period teacher. Does that make sense? Yeah, Trey.
Do we just get to wander around the school?
No. No, you get to stay in this classroom.
Just this classroom?
Just for 6th period. For whatever that designated thing is. Unless my class gets too many people, in which case then I'll say to Mr. Pettit, hey, speaking of, Mr. Pettit, if there's too many of them in here on Thursday of next week, then I'll send some of them and you can relocate them to some, like, you know.
Yeah, go home, you guys.
That's what I'm telling them to do. It's like I'm telling them to do.
We want to hang out with you.
Okay. So you guys didn't take that the wrong way, did you, when I said get out of here? Did you?
I did.
No. You did? No. Trey, if you want to stick around, because what will we be doing? We're going to be watching Animal Farm. You'll have already seen the last half of it the day before. It's scary?
It's too dark.
It is it's not like a kid's story. It's got animals, but it's, yes, you read it, yes. Live version one. Yeah, yeah. The animated version was like way, way older, and it's, anyway. So, all right, questions? Okay, and yep, that's it, because I don't have any quizzes and so forth for you. All right, ready? All right, let's do this. Okay. Oh, by the way, over the break, hope you had a nice break, there was no debate. Second debate got canceled. The third debate might take place, although apparently it looks like they might have a mute button. Now, I don't know if necessarily one or both of the presidential candidates will agree to that, so that might get canceled too. What's not going to get canceled? The presidential election 2 weeks from today. We will have a presidential election, and then we will either have Donald Trump remaining as the 45th president, or we will add a 46th spot, and we'll figure out what to do with that. Yes?
What if somehow Trump and Biden both died from corona?
What?
Let me ask you this question. All these hypotheticals, what if, when does this take place? Huh? If it happened, and we've only got 2 weeks, if it happened before the election, the Republican Democratic parties would replace. Okay? If it happens after the election, then probably you still have the Republican Democratic. After the election, it doesn't matter because, I mean, for one of them, they're the loser. So, you know, bye-bye loser. So it only matters with respect to the winner. And we've never actually had somebody win an election, but before they take the oath of office, die. We've never had that. The closest we've had, and we don't have any real provision for it, so it would be like if Biden won and died before, when is the next president getting sworn in? Do you guys remember that? January 20th, 2021. You can mark that on your calendar, January 20th, 2021. That's when the next president takes the oath of office. If it's Trump, it's like, you know, repeat. Does pretty much the same thing. If it's Biden, then he would take the oath of office on that day. If whoever gets elected, if they die before that time, I don't know, that would be really kind of, bless you. A lot of it might depend on like the political party that they're from, giving suggestions as to who would replace them. I do know what the answer is. I'm going to ask you this question. If, let's say Biden or Trump died of coronavirus, either one of those got elected, and it happened, they died after they took the oath of office, who would take over? Exactly. Yeah, that's in the Constitution, the vice president. And that's exactly what happened. The very first time that happened was President number 9 up here, William Henry Harrison. He took the oath of office, gave a speech on the inauguration day, caught pneumonia, and was dead within about a month. And so, number 10, John Tyler, was his vice president, and he became president right after that. Yes?
What if they have a, like, since this might happen with Biden, since he's so old, but like, what if they have a stroke or something right in the middle?
Trey?
He's 78, he's
So I hope you get to be 78 someday, too.
well, I'm not going to be regular.
Let's wait and see, okay? Let's wait and see. I might not be around there to look and observe at your condition when you're 78 years old, but we'll wait and see, okay? So, are you guys ready? All right, let's get to it. We got Alexander II, who has been looking at the situation. His country had previously lost in the Crimean War, and he wanted to fix it by industrializing the country. And if you want to have industrialization, if you want to have factories with people working in them, creating all kinds of modern technology and equipment and so forth, and guns, you need to have workers that can go there. Does that make sense? And so he freed up a lot of the work. He tried to free up a lot of the workers in the fields, and that there was like, people are like, well, you didn't do enough. Because he sort of freed them up, but then a lot of them actually weren't that free to go. So you didn't have that many heading to the cities to go work in the factories and so forth. And then some people are like, well, you're just stupid. I hate compromisers. You didn't move far enough. I mean, you're darned if you do, and you're darned if you don't. And what's the lesson going to be? Write this down. The lesson that's going to come from this is then you need to either go one direction or the other. Now, that's not necessarily the lesson that everyone should take from things, because honestly, I know I look back and I listen to all the times my dad, Orville Hanson, talked about like politics and getting things done in Washington, D.C. and so forth. And a lot of times part of that conversation was you need to come together. He was a Republican. He worked very closely with Democrats. On some of these things, you really need to come together, because it's like, let me see, how many countries do we live in? One. You know, instead of whipsawing, being back and forth, sometimes you really do need to compromise. Have you ever compromised in your life?
Yes.
No. You have. When was the time that you compromised, Anna, that you want to share? It's okay if you can't think of it. I mean, when you think of the word compromise, do you think, good, that's positive? You don't like compromise? Really? I bet there's some things you would compromise on. Maybe. In order to, if there's somebody who you care about and you want to work well with or have a positive relationship with, will you compromise? Meet halfway sort of thing? Right? Or do you say, hey, friend, come over to my location. I want to see you move over to my location, and then we'll have a friendship. Is that how it works? No. Yes. Like my way or the highway, pal. Although it is interesting, because sometimes when people think of compromise, do you compromise on your core principles? You're like, I don't think that's so good. Because sometimes people, it's an interesting word. Same word can be used to describe things that are very polar. Compromise with a friend so that you can get along. But other people will be like, don't compromise your basic principles. Like if somebody says, here's a donut if you deny your, I don't know, religious beliefs or something. And you're like, oh, that looks like a really good donut. You would take that donut and you're like, because you'd be like, and then somebody goes, you didn't have any religious beliefs or so forth anyway. And you're like, yeah, here's my religious belief, donuts. I'm just like, what the heck? The temple, settle down, settle. We can have discussions about various different religious beliefs and so forth without, and this is actually a core belief of mine, I don't like people bad-talking other kinds of religious beliefs and so forth, even if you've had various different experiences and so forth with it. Because, have you ever had somebody who had beliefs of a religion or not religion and so forth and really leaned into you? How many of you guys have ever had that?
Yeah.
Okay, so there you're like, back off a little bit, Okay, so it's one of those things, because when you're in America, I don't know, can we just vote out people's religious beliefs? Can we just say we're going to vote out this particular religious group? Exactly, and that's going to be the First Amendment. We'll get to that in our next unit of the Constitution. So those things matter a great deal. So it's another thing, it's kind of can you work with people and agree to disagree and so forth? My dad, as a Republican, found he was able to work with Democrats. They didn't agree on everything. Good grief. No, they didn't. But they actually got along quite well. Okay? What about the guys who thought of Alexander II and his ideas to make his country stronger? Was he willing to compromise with it? Did he stop Alexander and go, yo-ho, Alexander, can you pull up your carriage here for a minute? I want to have a chat. Was that what his idea was? No, he wanted to blow him up. And here's what that guy got instead. Write this down. He got a church. Okay, there we go. So we got the church on the road where he got blown up. Okay? And then they got Alexander III. Write this down. We're going to talk about Alexander III now. And as the slide indicates, I like this slide. I found it. Alexander III was all about, no, we're not going to have a compromise discussion. In fact, we're not even going to have a compromise. We're not going anywhere near where those reformers have in mind. He's going to be, I am the ruler, and I don't want to hear about these newfangled ideas and so forth. I'm not all about that. He is going to be very repressive. Now, it's very interesting because at that time in history, this is a good time to introduce some new ideas. At that time in history, there was a German who was looking at some crazy things going on in factory cities in Europe. And this guy came to a conclusion. He says, you know who should own the factories? not the factory owners. The workers should own the factories. The workers should be in charge. Raise your hand if you know who I'm talking about. He was a German. Mark my word, I'm sure you'll know it. No, it's not Hitler. He was a German too. But this is a guy, his first name is Karl. Okay, and he doesn't wear a hat. Okay. Karl, sorry, that's everyone. He basically is like, we need to get rid of government. We need to get rid of all of these factory owners and landowners, and we need to give it all to the workers. It's communism. And who was the founder of the idea of communism? Write it down, Karl Marx. M-A-R-X. Karl Marx, okay? And so at times in history you will hear them referred to as Marxists. Another synonym that you hear more often would be communists. Okay? So there were some communists, and you're like, how could there possibly be many communists in Russia? There's hardly any factories. Well, there's enough factories, and they're just getting started on having factories there. And some of the ideas, communist, Marxist ideas, are like that maybe the factory workers should rise up and they should take charge. Well, guess what Alexander III had to say about that idea? Exactly. Thank you very much. Yes. Whack. He was very repressive of those kinds of ideas. Write that down. Alexander III hated communism. He hated Marxism. Here's one thing he really hated. Here's democracy. No, I'm serious. Because in democracy, the basic idea behind democracy is you start letting people express their point of views and having elections and having the people who get elected get to set policy. Do they have that in Russia? Have they ever had that in Russia? Have they ever had democracy? Now let me just check this. In another country, say, that had a monarch, Britain, were they doing democracy? Yes. By that time, what kind of democracy was it if you still have a monarch? Constitutional monarchy. So you started seeing constitutional monarchies popping up in places of Europe. You know, they'd keep the monarch, and they would have elections, and the people who would do well in the elections would set the policy, run the government. Alexander III was like, no, I don't want those ideas. That might have been something that maybe Alexander II might have gone along with, but look what happened to him. Basically, Alexander III's idea is, if you start the conversation with these people, they're never going to be satisfied. And if they're not satisfied until they get everything that they want, they'll blow you up. So here's what you do instead of starting a conversation with them. Snuff them out. This guy right here, we're going to talk a lot about him as we go along. His name is Vladimir Lenin. He was the first leader of communist-dominated Soviet Union. You see his picture right up there on the with the red flag back there? I picked that up when I was traveling in the Soviet Union. I'll tell you about that story more in 1985. Or I traveled there in 1985. I'm not going to go back to the past. You're like, I was never around then. I was. He will establish that. But maybe you didn't know this. He had an older brother that was into it before he was. And here's what happened to the older brother when the police, secret police around Alexander III, found out about him. Exactly, they killed him. So here's a lesson that Lenin, younger Lenin, would learn. You ready? Keep it secret. Keep it quiet. Organize, but don't let people know about it. Listen very carefully. It's called having a secret cell. It's not like a cell phone, but it's like a small little group of people, diehard believers. And you can think of an obvious reason why they wouldn't want to keep it very secret. Because if they didn't keep it secret, who would find out about it? The government. And what would the government do to them? Yeah, they'd whack them. Yeah, some of you guys have got that motion down pretty well. So these guys are going to keep it secret until the time is right, until things are so bad that the people are like, wow, we need leaders. And then these guys are going to sneak out there, and they'll go, we'll be the leaders, we'll take charge. I mean, honestly, think about this. if you're in a country and there's some group of people, a small group of people that have some really radical ideas like, I don't know, conducting terrorist activities, do they talk about it openly on the streets? No, they really don't. They keep it very quiet because if they talk about it openly in the streets, in this country, what will happen to them? Yeah, I mean, if that happens in a repressive, autocratic society like Russia, you better believe. And they're sending spies all over the place to try and find out where those folks are. Does that make sense? Okay? So, instead of, make sure you write this down, during Alexander III, instead of moving toward democracy and reform, they moved the other direction. More repression, more autocracy, more power just held by the ruler. Do you have a question? No. Yes, go ahead.
I had a question about
Mm-hmm.
why would you want to make factories owned by the workers if the owner is a worker?
He would say this. The owner of the factory doesn't really do the work, so he shouldn't really get anything. Oh, no, I know that. But he's just, Karl Marx would say, whatever, the building, the workers can earn control of the building, but what really matters, what's going on in the building, is the work that's being done. That's what Karl Marx would say. That's what Lenin would say. I don't know, think about this. Because there's actually kind of an in-between that actually works for a lot of people in America today. You ready? If you work at a business, okay, if you work at a business today, you get paid like a salary or you get paid wages, right? Is there any way, think about this, raise your hand, is there any way that you could become an owner, at least partly, of that business? Yes, Trey?
Invest.
Exactly. Invest how? What do you buy?
Stock.
You buy stock of that business. Yeah, exactly. Did you say stock?
I said stock.
Right. When you're in economics class, the word is stock. Anyway, so the stock. So you buy stock. So you buy part ownership of that business. I mean, hello, that's the American way. So we got a mixture. A lot of businesses are owned in part by the people who work there. The people who own the stocks. The stocks are pieces of paper that say you have ownership. Here is a piece of paper. Now you have, it's like, I don't know, Green Bay Packers is a football team. Who owns the Green Bay Packers? A lot of people in Green Bay. Yeah. I mean, it's like one of the unusual football teams. They're owned by the people. All right. So, we have quick, no, those people are hired by the team. Anyway.
You have the owner, the
Yeah.
general manager. The owner hires the general manager hires the head coach, the head coach hires everyone else.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. So, moving on. Before we get too far along in there, I put this slide in here because I wanted you to discover something that had taken place as we move forward, and because we've been talking about Russia, right? And I want to talk about this slide for a little bit. We've got Alexander III, and the time that he's in charge of Russia, all right, it's expanded quite a bit. This is basically sort of the size and breadth of Russia. And we know that when the previous czars were taking over land, sometimes they would move Russians in. You have that in your notes? They would move the Russians in. Cossacks and so forth, moving into territory. This is interesting, though, because one of the things that was taking place by the time we get to this stage in history, we've got lots of Russians in Russia. The yellow, don't be so, that's not like there's a whole bunch of other non-Russian peoples there. Mostly the areas of yellow are like where people can't really live. Most of that is referred to in general as Siberia. It's very cold. It's very hard to live there. But notice this, in Central Asia, you've got a lot of Turkic Muslim peoples. Over here, you've got Baltic peoples and even some Finns and so forth. And over here, you got people from the Caucasus, Armenians and Azerbaijanis. Yes. And Georgians. And so you have, write this down, even in Russia, because they've expanded and taken over territory, partly so that Like, I'm going to take over this territory because it's good for national security. But it does create some issues. And eventually when we get to modern Russia, do you know what is still going to be part of modern Russia? Mostly just the Russian bits. So if you look over to this map right here, see all those areas that are kind of like blue right in here and to the south? You go to those areas in the world today and it's not Russia. Those are Central Asian countries like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan, just north of Afghanistan and Pakistan. And you go over here, and there's separate countries, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. And you go to the Baltics, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, they're separate. Oh, and there's Ukraine. So, an interesting thing, just to kind of know where some of the people are as we go through that. Just wanted to throw that slide up there for you.
So, is ethnicity, like, okay, I'm confused on the, okay, so, let's say I was, like, black, living in, France, would I say, or, like, I was born in France, would I say my ethnicity is, like, okay, so let's say I'm black, and I was born in France, but my family's, like, from Kenya, and would I say my ethnicity is Kenya or France?
Interesting question. This is a very important, serious question, okay? This country has a lot of people who came here from other parts. And to the extent that they're moved in and melded in and mixed in and so forth, a lot of folks refer to them as American. Okay, so American, it's kind of like, what is your national identity? You could have like DNA going back to Asia or Africa or South America and so forth, but if you identify as American, you're American. Different than on this map. If you were to say, ask the people living in this part, see where I'm pointing, in Central Asia, mostly Muslim, Turkic peoples, and say, what is your national identity? You're not going to get too many of them saying Russian, because that was a conquered area. If you go, and we'll see this particularly in this little area right here, Estonia, you go there and you get some Russians that have moved in and so forth, but a lot of the people whose families have been living there for a long time, you're like, what is your nationality? Estonian. What's your national flag colors? Blue, black, and white. It's quite different. So it's a very good question because you talk about like what is your identity. One of the things that happens a lot when people move to this country is, not always, but a lot, is that they become part of this really interesting, mixed, sometimes conflicting American thing. And if you really don't like it, then you might have, like say for example in Canada, you've got a whole region that has mostly people speaking French. And sometimes those folks will say, we don't want to be part of Canada anymore. We want to be a separate country. Do you remember last year in the election of 1860? I don't think that's going to happen this year, but in the election of 1860 for president, Abraham Lincoln was elected. He didn't receive any votes in a large part of the South. And those southern states were like, we want to leave. And they tried to move off and create their own separate nation. That didn't work out very well. They lost that war. Okay? But it's a good question. And as we'll see, all of that holding together, what held it together through much of history? A Tsar with a strong military. When you don't have that, they might go off and form up separate countries. Here and then over here.
So is ethnicity where you were born or where you're from, like more specifically?
I would say it's kind of a mixture. Because if your parents, let's say, for example, I think my mom was born in England, and then she married my dad and came to the United States. She spent most of her life in the United States. She's a U.S. citizen, although she definitely is very English. She's got a very English accent. If you were, let's just say for argument's sake, my parents married and then moved to Britain and had all 7 of us kids, and then we moved to the United States, what would be my ethnicity? Would I be British, or would I be an American? I don't know. It depends. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of depends. Some people are like, I remember there was this question. It was fascinating because they were talking to somebody who was from Jamaica, I think, and I think maybe like his, hey, and I think it was like his parents or so forth. Anyway, they'd moved to Britain, and so they were talking about like dark skin and what do you call yourself, and it's like, you know, do you call yourself an African American, which of course is silly because they're living in Britain. How could they be an African American? And his response was, as far as what his ethnicity, what his nationality was, he'd said, I'm British. Yeah, I mean, just British. I mean, he didn't want to go into that. In this country, we have a lot of, you know, African American, Korean American, Asian American, Italian American, Irish American. And some people are like, that's cool, more holidays, you know, more interesting places to eat, you know, with that, all that lovely disbursement of culture. Unfortunately, you sometimes run into people that are like, no, I don't like your group. We've had that in our country's history, which is a real pain and really a nuisance. But for the most part, our country has had a lot of acceptance of, ultimately, of different peoples that have come in. So, is our country ready to break apart at the seams?
Probably.
I don't think so. On ethnicity reasons? I hope not. Russia, though, will have some of these challenges. And when Russia starts falling apart a bit, it's going to break in certain areas. Like here, that's going to fall off. That's going to fall off. That's going to fall away. Yeah?
I have a question about, like, people wanting to leave. Is it not kind of like what's going on in that started the war in Iran? Like, people wanted to leave and they left and then someone took their land, but then they wanted it back.
I'm not sure if I'm following exactly the situation that you're talking about with Iran. Iran's been a country for a long, long time, and it does have some challenges.
Like, something with Pakistan, you know,
Well, yeah, with Pakistan and India, you'll learn more about this in the 12th grade. Yes, yes. How India used to be controlled by Britain, and then when they became an independent country, they split. And you had Pakistan, which is mostly Muslim, and India, which is mostly Hindu. And it did create some tensions and so forth. All right. Alexander III, he dead. Okay? He dead. Are we ready for the next one? Are you ready for the next Tsar? He died. His heart stopped. I mean, I don't know exactly what caused his heart stop, but he did. It did stop. Okay? So, I mean, oh, wait. There was a couple of things I wanted to point out as well for Alexander III. Sorry. And I've got it right here in the bullet points. One thing he did that was very important for Russia. Let's actually go back to this slide. This helps pretty well because it is a map. He had built, during his time, the Trans-Siberian Railway. Write that down. The Trans-Siberian Railway. Do you see the bullet point next to him? We got the political repression, and we do have the continued industrialization, although will it be enough? Answer, no. We do have the Russification. We're going to have Russians moving into, and like, you speak Russian. And of course, some people are going to go, I don't want to speak Russian. I want to speak my home language. Quit trying to force these things. But to make his country stronger, write this down. To make his country stronger, he had built the Trans-Siberian Railway, which I will tell you. It starts out in the west, St. Petersburg, Moscow, and goes all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Got it? It's still there. It's still there. I mean, if you were to go on the Trans-Siberian Railway, think of it as like, I mean, here we go. I don't know, this map. Look at that. It's go from Moscow all the way to the coast. We had the Transcontinental Railway in the United States that was, I think the link was done sometime like the 1860s or so forth. In Utah. And it's very important for transportation, for transferring military things, for the economy, to have that. So that was a good thing that they had. Will it be enough? But it is an improvement. And it did take place during the time of Alexander III.
What happened to that? I mean, was it the same railway that they built like through China or somewhere to get some water?
To get water?
Well, I thought that they built this, or was it in the Soviet Union or whatever, sometime around that area where they built a railroad, I think back through China because they wanted to build like something that can get water or something.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Okay, I mean, I'm sure there's all kinds of railway projects and so forth. This one's going to be very important because it will link the Pacific. When we see Russia get involved in a war in the Pacific, in that region with Japan, the Trans-Siberian Railway is going to play an important role. Okay? Now, let's move now to Nicholas II. Here we go. Quickly.
Is the Trans-Siberian Railway only allowed for Russians to ride it? Or, like,
It just goes through Russia.
so, like, does it actually have like a train for passengers?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You can go on that train. It's a long ride. I don't know that I would necessarily. I've read accounts of people who have gone on the full length of it. It's not a lot to do. You know, chat and sleep and chat and look out the window and yeah. I mean, it goes through a lot of Siberia. It's not like you're going to see like really, I don't know, it's yeah. But there's not a lot of stops along the way. It's like, oh, wow, there's this really cool touristy place and so forth. It's a journey unto itself, and it's a very, very long railway, and it connects the easternmost parts of Russia to the westernmost parts of Russia. All right, now, Nicholas II. Here he is. Write this down. Nicholas II will be the last Tsar. And there's a reason for him being the last Tsar. He is going to have some difficulty handling, guess which of the legitimacy questions. Oh, I already gave that. National security. Yeah, he's going to have some challenges with national security. Is he going to be a tough, dynamic, Peter the Great, Ivan the Terrible, Catherine the Great kind of person? In fact, no, you can make a little note. He never really wanted to be czar. He's like, I just want to be married to my wife, who I love, and to spend time with my 4 daughters and my son. And yeah, but I have to be the supreme ruler of Russia. And that has a lot of responsibilities. Oh my gosh, it has a lot of responsibilities. And it's really difficult because his wife was very, very concerned as the mother of the children, right? He's got 4 daughters, right? And then the little son. Of course, you're thinking about which is the most important child? Wow, that was fast. Why is the son the most important child? Because he's male, and the way that they did the inheritance and so forth, it would go to the son. Although we've seen sometimes, remember, what was it, Peter III? He inherited the throne, and he wasn't very good at the job. And Catherine, you know, yeah, he was gone, and she took over. Well, here's the problem with little Alexei, little boy. You've heard about this? Little Alexei. You think you know where this? Oh, you think you know where this is going. Well, little Alexei was doted on, of course, by his father and his mother, but they had a real concern about him. He had hemophilia. I knew it. I will tell you. It is an inherited blood disease, and it actually occurred, it was inherited through his mother's line of the family. His mother was the granddaughter, maybe it was the granddaughter, I think it is, the granddaughter of Queen Victoria of England. And hemophilia basically is, it basically causes internal bleeding. Internal bleeding. And it can be very, very painful. And it can be deadly. So let's say, you know, if you bump into something, you get a bruise, right? So you get like a, it looks kind of ugly, but I mean, eventually it goes away. It heals up inside. With hemophilia, it might not. At the very least, you could have a lot of pain associated with that. I mean, so they were very, very protective. The kid was like, you know, do not get bruises, because he would get bumps and accidents. I mean, he's a kid. And he would be in pain, and they couldn't do anything about it, and it would bother the mom, it would bother the dad. I mean, was there anybody who could bring relief and comfort to poor little Alexei, and therefore his parents? Because if that person could do those things, he would be very influential. This is a good place to stop off, isn't it? Rasputin. No. He would come and say prayers and do things, and little Alexei would be feeling a lot better, and I tell you what, the parents would be like, Rasputin, you are an amazing faith healer guy. He was also a serious womanizer. He drank like you would not know what, and he messed around with women. It was just crazy and so forth. But it's not like he's going to be a top advisor to the Tsar and his wife, is he? Yes. Actually, you know what I have queued up is we'll see if we have time to do it next time. There's a little dance that goes along with Rasputin. Ra, Rasputin. Yeah, we'll see if we can get to that. So, Rasputin says, make sure to wipe down your desks. And then make sure to go to bathroom before you are late to other class. Yes, Rasputin bids you well. До свидания.